Good morning, Will. How are we today?
Hi, Mark. Very well indeed. How are you doing?
I'm good. Now, for our viewers, welcome to another Leaders Report. I'm in Berlin. Will, you look like you're in your office in London?
Yep. I'm at the home base, HQ, and the sun is shining in London today, which is great.
Oh, well, that's a great day there. Um, Look, I think there's a couple of things I want to go do in this Leaders Report, where naturally we're going to continue in our series where we're focusing on regions. We're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the African region. And the feedback that I've got from the Norden Leaders Report that we went and did and the China Leader Report, and I think we need to go back to the China Leader Report because, as everyone knows, in the first quarter of 2026, the rate of change is unprecedented. We used to live in an idea where one of the statements that's made at 1 hour during the day now would have been a year's worth of progress from a geopolitical perspective. So we need to go back there. But we'll be looking at Africa. I do want to also talk about our design project so that our leaders have got an idea about that. But I also want to go dig in a bit about Milan because next week you and I are off to Milan, and that's a really interesting project for us. For you, Will, in the last week, what's been going on in the London design world for you and the other parts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to think about this time of year, particularly in Europe, because Milan is the big event which occupies a huge amount of airtime. I'm currently getting slightly deluged by invitations and information about what's happening. It's a genuinely global moment. And I think for you and I to be there collecting information, insights, obviously talking to people from across the globe will be a really interesting moment. It is really the only truly global moment in the design calendar. So there's a lot of kind of focus on that. We know the season then continues. For London, there's the Clerkenwell Design Week program, which is happening. And then just a little bit later, the emphasis shifts to Copenhagen as well. So, it's event season. So it's a busy time.
Yeah, and I know that we've been given a bit of an insight into some of the new ranges that Vitra have got, and they went through because that was, I think, the news range that they've got is a second generation. What was the name of that really innovative product that was plywood and straps? It
Yeah,
was about 4 or 5 years ago.
yeah, that's right. Called Hacked, and it was designed by Greekix, and the thinking has been extended through from a relatively rough, humble material product that could do different tasks and be quite sort of rough and ready. And obviously, the notion was that components make one thing, and therefore flexibility is at the heart of the next feature round. So maybe we should put some notes and links into the show notes because it's a very interesting collection, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it's presented in Milan.
And I think one of the really good signals that came out of that briefing from Vitra was that they do systems. They're very proud of the fact that they've got their chair catalogue that goes back and they're, 50 years old, but they're still the same chair. They're contemporary. They've worked out how to modernize it. There's some colorways considerations, but it's basically the same platform.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting because when we get to Milan, we've got a great session. We're going to be recording a podcast session with Mauro Pacini, head of design for Samsung. But we're seeing the third generation of their television as furniture. The first one was the amazing Seraph. And I must say, I've got to find a space in my house to go have one of those Seraph screens because they are just iconic. And I think we talk about mid-century furniture. I think we're going to go talk about 2014 furniture, which was the Seraph. And there was the Yves Behar Fuse project, frame project that they went and did. And they're now in their third generation of a screen as furniture, a screen that fits into the way that we go live with all of the high touch, high finish surfaces. But what really interests me is we're going to go see Samsung saying this is technology that aids human life rather than technology that interrupts human life. And I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to see at Milan is what's going on about the luxury resonant experiences that people are trying to provide. And where does technology sit inside of that? Because I don't know about you, but every time I see a luxury experience with technology in it, it's generally a failure. People get to do the luxury part, but they don't get to do the resilience of the appliance. And that's what interests me about Samsung. Samsung are an incredible appliance company, and they've now got this incredible design-led focus as Mauro at the helm. What are we going to go see that they actually start to nudge? We've seen IKEA, and no doubt we'll go see the IKEA studio again. IKEA have made many attempts to go get technology in their ranges, but it's in a third, fourth, fifth generation until I get it right. Similar to Vitra not getting it right, 100% right in generation one. I don't think there was any expectation. It's how fast do you move through those generations in your strategy. So that's going to be great to go look at that. I think I might need a glass of water. What do you think? I'm croaking here.
Well, listen, obviously we're going to see a lot of components that are very focused on that kind of luxury upper end of the market product launches, and that integration of technology and the user experience is going to be very interesting. I think with Mauro at the helm, Samsung will be doing a shift which looks at how you reduce friction as a user and integrate things into your life. Increasingly the way that AI is supporting life, knowledge, activity, information flow. Yeah, so I think we're set for a very interesting visit in Milan.
Yeah, and look, we see through particularly the Asian nominees that come into the awards, the home interiors, the level of crafting of a haven that they do is phenomenal. And working out how to get your technology-led products into that haven environment is a really, really interesting challenge.
Yeah,
Because what you want to have is that the friction of technology is removed, that it just does stuff for you, but you want it to actually also resonate with the rest of the life experience that you're trying to go create. So I think this is a really interesting conversation to go have in the midst of the most extreme luxury resonating experiences that you could imagine. I think we'll probably need a little bit of time to come down from, but I'm looking forward to that because that kicks off our new podcast series called Designed, where we actually look at the projects that have been designed as against our leaders podcast, where we're talking about the idea of strategy, viewpoints, signals that we've got. And then we also need to be able to go look at what the next futures are. And those three elements of what's coming next, what is it that actually has already been delivered, and what are some of the signals that might help designers and strategists to work out which direction they go. I think we've got a pretty good offering there. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Now, let's get into Africa. Africa is a mind-bending concept because it is just so huge. Well, do you know how many people live in Africa?
give me the figure.
1.6 billion. 1.6 billion. Now, when I ask most people, they get it wrong by a factor of, they're about 200, 300 million people. So when you think about Africa and you've got 1.6 billion people in Africa, and you then think of America with 350 odd million people, give or take. It depends how many people have been deported by ICE this week. I think that's where the number changes, or how many people have decided to leave the country because of the state it's in. But I'll leave that to one side. But when you look at it, there's like a 4.5 times difference between the African population and the American population. We know everybody is thinking about, well, maybe I don't want to do the work in in America, or maybe I want to go do work in a new market as a replacement substitute because of the uncertain state that's happening in America at the moment. But because of the size difference, we wind up with some maths that come in. So a 5% penetration in Africa gives you the same number of customers as a 25% penetration in America. Okay. And I went and did some numbers. Normally I don't look in the podcast, look in my book here, but I went and I did some. Okay. So if you go look at the idea of the top 1% in the UK, the top 1% hold an immense amount of the wealth in the UK. We know that. In Africa, it's the top 5% represent the same wealth as that of the UK. But the difference is if you're selling into that upper socioeconomic high wealth market, in the UK, you have 700,000 customers to go sell to if you've got the top percentages
Yeah.
there. You have 80 million in Africa. What? So scale. And I think that's what's really important. So I think we've acknowledged before that I use Claude as a co-worker to go help me as I'm doing research and preparing. a really good example of AI aiding my work, not driving my work. So I went off and I asked, well, okay, so tell me the top 5 countries in Africa that I should be doing business with, and go tell me the top 5 that I shouldn't. Out of the 54 nations in Africa, the top 5 are really important that you consider them on your shopping list. We'll put them in the show notes. And the bottom 5, we'll put them in the show notes. These are people who really don't want to have business with you, international business. But the top 5 also represent a large amount of that pool of wealth and opportunity. At the moment, we know in South Africa, one of their big problems is a burgeoning economy, and they don't have enough designers to go service the business down there. So partnerships, using studios who are the local lead studio, but then are getting the work delivered from elsewhere. And I think we've seen, a small practice like Heatherwick. That's how they go service their work around the world. Heatherwick only has one studio, which is in London. The rest of the time, working with satellite partners around the world. If we go think of Snurheader, Snurheader's got a few offices now, but when they were establishing, they didn't have all those offices. They used a satellite partnership relationship. And I think that's really important. Our leaders consider where are the satellite partnerships that they could be working with. But then yesterday I was in Paris and I was at Le Bon Marche, the LVMH original gallery store. And I was looking at the house brand packaging that's in there. Now, there's no doubt that house brand packaging project is also going to be required for a department store in Cape Town or anywhere, or Cairo. So who's doing those projects, and how do you actually reach out, and how do you make those connections, and are they safe markets? But the African market is so huge. What I did find interesting, and I've got to thank Claude here for going and helping me, is that I went and I said, tell me the growth of GDP for 54 nations of Africa over 10 years, and tell me the growth of 10 years GDP growth by American states. The American states, around about 3% over a 10-year period, maybe a couple of them got up to 4. But in Africa, there's 34 states or nations that actually have greater than 3% GDP growth sustained over that period. So again, if you're looking at where partnerships and you're looking at where markets are, Africa is a market worth considering. And that's such an important thing. We need to know where growth is and we need to follow growth, but you need to do it safely. So that's why we're saying go to these 5 recommended. You should be considering them. The others, do your due diligence, but we want to send a really big signal to our studio partners. Think about Africa as one of the market options for your growth. 20 years ago, we would have been saying that about China, and we saw some people got burned in China, most didn't. And I think exactly the same thing happens here. I know the people who've got burnt in America. I personally, myself, I got burnt by the Howard Hughes Corporation. Who would have thought that such a big listed company would burn you? That's what happens with international trade. Part of that was me being a little bit reckless and trusting. Some of it was also maybe the behavior of Howard Hughes. That's markets, that's business. That doesn't mean America is unsafe. It means maybe I needed to be a little bit more cautious in my trade and terms. And exactly the same thing goes for our leaders. But what I do want to do is make sure that people think Africa is a market that I should explore, and we're going to dig in deeper. We're going to go look at specific examples. But, the Ethiopian airport project that's coming through, oh my God, it looks like it's come out of Star Trek or Star Wars. It's phenomenal. So, the more we can encourage our leaders to think of new markets and to think of how do they actually deal with a change of market. We know that America has decided to go and remove itself from being a reliable, trustworthy market. So you've lost access to 350 million people. Well, how do you find another 350 million people? Maybe that 350 million people are inside 1.6 billion people. And what you've got to do is actually sift through a little bit more. They know where they are. This is a much larger market, and they do things like they come to the London Design Festival. They come to the
Yep.
showcases that are there in that, economic exchange programs. They want to buy, they want to be part of that luxury, resonant experience market. And that's what a lot of our studio partners deliver. So I think this is like a really interesting project. And in September, I think we haven't mentioned about the fact that we're going to be doing our showcase in conjunction with Material Matters during London Design Festival. Do you want to give us a bit more detail on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting opportunity. You know, London has its place as a global meeting point, and I think through the combination of the Better Future showcasing and Material Matters, which is one of the leading trade events within the festival program, that confluence of interest that can come together, particularly around the notion of exchange. So this is feeding the opportunity for global trade on both the kind of information side of things in terms of setting out the agenda, just as you have with the notion of the Africa opportunity as an emerging design market, but also making direct connections, showcasing products, creating opportunities to come together for events, exchange of information, and really, really, really importantly, actually connecting people. And I think this is really the essence of why you're in Berlin, we're going to Milan. It's the
Mm.
notion that actually connectivity is the most important thing that develops understanding, creates links and business opportunities. And I think that's where London in September will be a really exciting place for design exchange. And I'm really looking forward to that programming. And I think it'll be really good to have the studio partners engage with what we're doing and planning. The intention is very much to create a program over a number of years. So what we do in September is really a kind of harbinger of other things that we'll be developing around.
Yeah. So I know we're planning that by the end of the month that we've got a prospectus out so that people can begin to plan. How do they engage, whether it's about the projects they want to go put into the showcase, whether it's products that they've got, digital services that are there, even studio capacity. How do you want to present yourself to at the crossroads of global design, which is London Design Festival, and how do you begin to get that international trade side going? We've got lots of partners in London who joined us last year where we went and did our first event there. It'd be lovely to go see some new people. So that'll come out before the end of the month, which gives them a nice runway to plan what they're going to be doing. But we do want to excite people's imagination. That's, we know that between Africa, the Middle East, and China, 88% of all world population growth happens in the next 25 years. And we don't want them to get involved with it in the last 5 years of that. We want them to get up front so they're in the box seat and that they're getting those economic opportunities.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. No, it's going to be very exciting. And I think, it's time to create those links in a post disruptive world whereby we know where those links and opportunities exist as things recalibrate around, the potential for design in those emerging markets, but also in terms of, resolve friction-free products that we've been talking about. This is where all the dots begin to join up.
I think so. So I'll see you in a few days in Milan, and I think our heads are going to be spinning. We may not do a session from Milan because I know every time you try to do something where you're in that moment, it's a little bit too frenetic. So let's catch up with our leaders in a couple of weeks' time, and that we'll be able to go give them a good digest of here's what we saw in this ultra luxury market, and this is where technology and trade are coming together for designed outcomes.
Looking forward to that and see you in Milan.